We'll be starting in about a couple of minutes, so if you could take seats. If you could take your seats, please. Thank you. So I want to welcome everyone here to the release of a very important report. My name is Pippa. I hold the role as one of the deputies at RCY, and I'll be gently trying to steward timing in the background and support work being done in a good way this morning. I just want to, before we get started, just acknowledge that on the screen there's a hashtag for those who are super into social media. This is our hashtag. Please feel free to use it. We're going to start, first of all, in a really good way by being hosted and guided by our elders from the land. So acknowledging elders Linda George, Kathy Nahaney, and Shane Point from Squamish and Musqueam. And as we enter in today, first of all, we're going to spend just a little bit of time in ceremony before we release the report. So I'm going to stand down and offer space into our elders to get us going in a good way.
Hutswile, Qualtana, Queensna. My ancestral name is Qualtana. My English name is Kathy Nahaney. I'm from the Squamish Nation. And today I want to welcome you all here, asking our ancestors to be with us, to guide us through this process, to be with each and every one of us, that we have an open mind and an open heart for the work that's going to take place today. And we thank all the ones who took the time to make this come together, asking a blessing for each and every one of them. And I want to ask each and every one of you, as you sit there, to also think about your ancestors, that they be here with you as well. Because every time we come together in any kind of ceremony, we always ask our ancestors to be with us, because that's where our guidance comes from. Osiam, Hichka.
Hutsquile, Nuxalia, Kushaman, Anwanaxton, Squalwan. My heart is really beautiful today. It was heavy yesterday, and I hold my hands up, Kayachton, to each and every one that is here today to listen to the words and to the work that will take place this morning. I give thanks to our great Creator. I give thanks to our ancestors for being here with us in the room. I give thanks that everyone traveled here safely. I give thanks for the empty chairs that are in this room, as we know the ancestors are with us today as we move forward in the work that needs to be done. I pray for peace for each and every one, but most of all, I pray for peace for the young man here, and I pray for peace for the future of our generations. Hosiam Tumatukutse.
Good morning. Is it on? Shauquelam. My relatives here today. My relatives are here today. lifted up my heart when I seen Shalqueelam, seen my relatives from the valley here, my Nuchanath relatives, my interior relative. It was good to see everyone. Siemna Siaya, leaders and our friends, Shwalako family. Yesterday was an amazing day. The team that worked in a most excellent way, who were both effective and efficient in what they did to produce this really wonderful writing called Don't Look Away. A few years ago, there were other authors. They wrote in plain sight. In plain sight, don't look away. Don't look away. All of us are wonderful human beings. We put our educations and our experience to work so that we can lift the children up. My parents lifted me up. Shalqueelam's mother, his father lifted me up when I was a young man to give me the strength that I needed to move forward. Yesterday, the team got together, powerful team, wonderful team. They got together to sit in a circle and express their feelings and their emotions about the work that they did, they shared in this room. What came to light for me when I seen this really beautiful box, historically, those boxes held our treasures. They held our treasures. We put them in there for safekeeping. Of course, the boxes were used for many things, but treasured. Today, this box, this is a symbol of that really wonderful new ancestor that we have who brought this writing, this important work to light. So don't look away. That's the message. Don't look away. I'm grateful to see all of you this morning here, coming to this wonderful place to witness. All of you are witnesses to witness this. Don't look away. The opening up of the words, hearing the words. So today, as witnesses, please feel what you're going to hear. Listen carefully to the words so that when you move out of this room today, that you take those words with you. And although you're doing an excellent job already, there's always extra we can do. We can always do extra. So when you move out of the room today, don't look away and do extra. Honored to be with you today. Honored, honored. Thank you. They got timing people.
We're just blanketing our elders in a good way. So yesterday, the RCY family and those closest to us in the preparation of the report, Don't Look Away, sat in circle with each other in ceremony. And what we wanted to do now is just respect and honor the ceremony that took place yesterday, and a few reflections from a couple of folks around the importance of the good work that was done in circle. So I'm going to hand to Elder Linda George to speak and reflect a little bit about the ceremony that took place yesterday.
Okay. As I stated earlier, I hold up my hands to each and every one that came forward yesterday in the circle. It's real. The emotions are real. The tears are real. Because we care. Because we have passion. It's because these little ones are our future. So everyone got to share a little bit of reflection as we went through some of the highlights. But I guess the most important thing that we took out of it is networking, working together with all forms of government, because we've seen over and over and over again, time and time again, ever since colonization, your square box do not fit in our Indigenous holes, and vice versa. So from here forward, we've been praying and praying to our Creator, to our ancestors, to hear, and the ancestors of all the non-Indigenous, the ancestors that work in the governments, the ancestors that work in private sector, hear what we're saying, communicate with us, work with us. Let's build those bridges to work together, because our children are our future. First Nations and non-First Nations, we have to work together. We can't continue to think we have to control something when that's not what it's about. Hosea.
We were also joined in the work by an amazing national group of advisors, and we've asked two of them to speak in briefly to the ceremony that took place yesterday as well. So just welcome Erwin Ullman up.
Thanks, Pippa. Let this be the moment. I thought about so many things after the circle yesterday, and I want to touch on two. The first is, I kind of knew it and felt it, but stories are powerful. You know, I thought about stories are a person's voice, and with a voice, you have power and influence, and with power and influence, you're an actor in the world, and being an actor in the world gives us all humanity. And you know, the story of this young little boy was at the center of the circle. I mean, literally, because that box was there, and figuratively. He now has a voice. He always had it, but we hear it now. And he has power and influence, because look around. You're here because of him. And he gives us the ability to act and have power, use our power and influence. And then we were able to share, thanks to the elders in the circle, our own stories. He gave us that. This young person, this child. And it was clear in that circle that everyone kind of took his story in. It became part of us in certain ways. And it, in a funny sort of way, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn telling what the circle, but all of us seem to have his story and him in our hearts, because he was in the room, but in our hearts, and we carried his story, and it melded with so many hundreds of other children. Everyone in the room knew, sometimes thousands, that did not get what they needed when they needed it in order to thrive. And we carry them. That circle is carrying him with us. And that ceremony gave us that power. And it's remarkable, because the other last thing, the elder, and I can't do the story he told about this justice at all, but I'll just say he talked about weaving cedar, and each of us braiding the cedar and making it strong and tight in the circle together. And that stuck with me, but reflecting on it, that circle had academics and parents and former youth in care and former advocates and social workers and you name bureaucrats around that circle, all different ways of thinking. And more than that, there were different ways of knowing. There's a way of knowing that I have, because I grew up on the Mississauga New Credit territory. I'm a guest there, big urban city. You know my culture, how I grew up, how I learned some of the things I think and how I think. And then there's the First Nations way of knowing, which was so powerful and actually led us. And we were able in that circle to have space for everybody to bring their ways of knowing together, because we all, I think, said, thanks to this young man, no more. No more. We're done, and we're going to work together. This circle, we're going to work together so that this doesn't happen again. This is, to me, that's remarkable, and it's an opportunity to create a place where every child gets what they need and when they need in order to thrive. Every family, no matter how constituted, gets what they need when they need it to do right by their children. And it's all underpinned by a sense of belonging in all its glorious forms. You belong to culture, identity, yourself, family, community, all underpinned by that. And I'm thinking there's members of government here, and the invitation in BC is to step into the circle. Say no more with us. And step into the circle and humbly and with humility work together within that circle to make our vision, the North Star that the advocate the representative has set for us, to make that a reality. And do it with this young man and all the other children we know at the center. So I left that, and I want to say this is possible across Canada. This is not just BC's story. His story is so many children across Canada. So I'm imploring, urging, just like I am the BC government, I'm urging all governments in our country to step into their own circles. They exist. And that's the hope and opportunity that I left and carry today, even though we're here in a very solemn moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Erwin. I'd like to call Bart Kunutskad, who is also a member of our Circle of Advisors, just to say a few reflections.
Kesekwithnam, good morning. I want to acknowledge respected elders and chiefs who are with us today. I'm a social worker. I started my career in 1987 on Hastings Street in Vancouver. I've been involved in child welfare up until today. I've witnessed, the withdrawal, the Gove report, the Hughes report, and many other reports along the way. I've had the honor to do the sacred work of being a social worker in both the Ministry of Children and Family Development and its previous ministries, and in Indigenous community, about 20 years in Indigenous community, supporting nations around their vision for their children. Around 2012, some work was begun, which culminated in the Aboriginal Policy and Practice Framework in British Columbia in 2016. And one of the core parts of that framework is gathering the circle. It's gathering the circle, listening, assessing, finding solutions, creating security, well-being, belonging, and keeping the circle strong. That framework that was developed and was signed on to by government, by Indigenous agencies, Indigenous child and family agencies, is a roadmap. The representative talks about a North Star. the Aboriginal Policy and Practice Framework. If we do nothing else but breathe life into that framework and continue to breathe life into that framework, that's the pathway forward. As a researcher for this report, I had the privilege to support, actually my wife and my daughter had the privilege to support the history of child welfare in British Columbia, that part. Being part of the circle, being part of the circle of advisors, being part of the researchers, being part of the representative team, the elders, the youth, the adults who all contributed to this work was a phenomenal process. The circle was gathered. And I think now is time for us to move to, we'll hear about listening, assessing, finding solutions, and then creating security, well-being, and belonging, absolutely critical, so we can keep this work strong, so we don't have to have yet another report like here. Yesterday was heartfelt. Yesterday we heard stories about, a child being able to dry themselves with a towel versus their father's shirt. That's what I heard yesterday when the circle gathered. And I think there's a phenomenal group. I think there's phenomenal partners. I think in partnership between government, both Canada, BC, Indigenous governments, and the folks that have been gathered by the RCY, we can support not looking away. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart. We're now going to call some witnesses here in this room to the good business that's being done here. So I'm going to welcome in our elders as well to move us through our witnessing.
To our friends and relatives who don't come from a Coast Salish background, witnessing is the most important part of our work. If we don't call witnesses, the work isn't recognized. You can do the work, no witnesses, it's not recognized by family and community. So witnesses are of the utmost importance. They are the historians. They're the ones who are going to carry the moment into the future. So witnessing, very important. Witnesses are to see, hear, and feel the work that's going to happen during the day. We're going to call 4 wonderful human beings to witness what's going to happen here today.
These witnesses are our modern newspaper, our modern social media. How we still have to carry our traditions on, and times change, culture evolves, but it is very important to hear. And the witnesses have a big role that they're taking on for this day. We'll see. Leslie Varley.
Johnny Morris. Karen Isaac. Tim Verish. Please come forward. To the witnesses the witnesses who were called, you can take your seats. You can go back to your seats. To the We're going to call as well Grand Chief Stuart Phillip to please witness the work that's going to happen here today. To the witnesses, it's now my opportunity to say to you, don't look back. Don't look back. Hear the words, see them, feel them, and continue to move forward. I'm now going to pass the moment on to our really wonderful Siaya, our friend Jennifer. She's going to provide you with an overview of the work that was done. Hajkasiam.
Good morning. I'd like to call up some very special people who will be joining me today and sharing remarks. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, Mary T.G., Cheryl Casimir, Bonnie Henry. If you would join me, please. And Minister Lohr. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you. Call and response. I want to begin by giving my heartfelt thanks to the Squamish peoples and to Kathy, Judy, and Linda for guiding us on these beautiful territories, the Squamish people, and to the Coast Salish peoples and Elder Shane Point, and to the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh peoples whose lands we are shared with long standing, for time immemorial, beautiful relationships and friendships. We are very fortunate to be able to gather on these lands to do this important work. And on behalf of myself and the RCY team, I'd like to extend gratitude to the people that have walked alongside us. And I want to acknowledge the circle of advisors who are kind of generally in this area, many of whom have traveled across the country or traveled from afar in order to be able to join us. And I'd like to particularly raise my hands to the Honorable Stephen Point and Gwendolyn Point too, for agreeing to be a part of this process and for bringing their heart and soul, and the more that I get to know them too, for the work that they have done on behalf of their children, their families, and their communities for decades. There is action in the way that they walk in the world. So I'd also really like to express my deep gratitude to cultural advisors Deb Foxcroft, Judy Wilson, and Wedledi Speck, who unfortunately can't be here today, but they have guided us from the very beginning of this work. And we would not be where we are right now without their wise guidance and their sacred teachings that were shared across their different heritages and cultural backgrounds to find the language and the ways of walking that would allow us to do their work in a good way. It's pretty overwhelming to see all of you here, and I'm grateful that you are. And I'd like you to take just a moment to look around at one another. See who is here. We have people who walk in education, in health, in mental health, community services, justice, disability services, recreation. We have the people that are in this room right now are the people that can make a huge difference in the lives of children and youth. And many of you have been doing that for years. In fact, I'd also like to say I have the great privilege of having the person in the room who 46 years ago enabled me to see the possibility in this work. Dr. Penny Perry and her beautiful partner, Tim Lewis, are here. That's a long time. And when I walked in that room, she just arrived from McGill to take up a position at the School of Child and Youth here at UVic, and I thought I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to be working with children, and I found my place. So how beautiful to have this in the room. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's begin. How do I move this forward? That would be a good place to start. Anybody help? There we go. There we go. Okay, thank you. Okay. There we go. Okay. So, our gratitude for all of you being here and for us to have this important conversation. All of us who've been involved with this story, and let me take a moment, we were actually gifted with a teaching yesterday to say that there's a risk in using the term story because we might evoke those memories of a child as we were reading stories that were fictional. I can assure you that there's no fiction in this story. So we were encouraged by Elder Point to speak about history and what has happened here. And I will refer to this story, but I want you to know that this is history, and we have an opportunity to embrace his story, this child's story, and this point in time in history in order for us to move forward in a good way. All of us who've been involved with this history has tried to tell it in a way that isn't a simple recitation of facts. We wanted to do this in a manner that builds empathy, respect, and dignity for a family that in so many ways is like all of our families, full of light and shadow, full of love, strength, and joy, but also complexity, struggle, and pain. I encourage all of you, as you read this family story, to try to imagine just what their experiences would have been, how it would have felt to try and navigate a confusing system that seems at times to work against you rather than for you, and how it must have felt to lose a child in the most devastating way possible. This story broke our hearts, but it also built our conviction that in BC we can do better and we must do better for our children. While this is a story of an Indigenous child, this is not an Indigenous story. It is a story about all of our children. And the messiness, the complexity, the love, the beauty, all of it. everyone in this room wants to do what's best for children. That I know. In fact, it was so beautiful seeing many of you walk in the room, many of you I've known for a very long time. And I'm just so grateful that you are with children, continuing to be with children and supporting them. But at the same time, many of us have been here a number of times before where there's a report that's released, there's outrage that's expressed, there's whatever feelings are arising, or, as this is just a small fraction of my archives at home. These are the reports that have gone before us. Many wise people, many powerful recommendations, and yet we continue to have a system that is designed in a 1950s model that is outdated and no longer serves us. How can we make it different this time, and what's it going to take to move a system that has been stuck in old colonial and siloed ways for too long? What's it going to take to transform a system from one that is primarily reactive to one that proactively nurtures our children and families? So many reports. So many opportunities before. So what's going to be different? Why was a child's life cut short, and how can we prevent such a tragedy from happening again? But even more, how can we make sure that children don't have to just try and survive our systems, but that they experience the belonging and the opportunity to thrive? I have to believe, after 46 years, that this time we're going to get the answers right. So let's start. Let's meet Colby. Colby is a name that we have given to this child. The staff have given this child, obviously. It's a pseudonym. And I don't want you for a minute to try and identify which community, which family, what's the real name. It matters to them, but it doesn't matter to us in terms of moving forward. His legacy will be to lead us through the complex constellation of systems meant to support our children and families and direct us to what we're describing as a North Star, a place where our systems of care for children in BC are no longer based on a narrow approach centered on child protection, but on a broader integrated base where we can all work together for the well-being of children in this province. So Colby. He was just like so many other 11-year-old boys. He loved to play soccer. He read Archie comics. My daughter is in the room. We read Archie comics when we were kids. Play Minecraft. He was one of those kids who got along with everyone at school. In fact, that was one of the most beautiful things that we learned about Colby, was his generous heart and spirit. He loved to laugh, to learn. He loved learning, loved school. He was always putting up his hand in class and was particularly interested in science and math. He was a great brother. One of his sisters remembered when she was sad, he used to come and make her feel better by lacing his fingers in her fingers to comfort her. He was a boy with many talents, so much promise, and so much hope in his heart. Born with a number of complex medical conditions, including a heart that didn't work very well, his resilience astounded many with whom he came in contact. He was an extraordinary boy, and he had so much potential. RCY has been working on this investigation and systemic review for the last year after hearing the details of how 11-year-old Colby and his middle sister were tortured by extended family members while in the legal care of the BC Ministry of Children and Family Development, and of course, how he was ultimately killed by his caregivers. One of our main goals with this investigation was to not cause further harm to this family or his community. They've been through enough. Another major goal, of course, was to shine a light on what happened, what went so wrong with the children's experience, and what will be different now. Very early on in the process, I went to the First Nations Leadership Council and asked, what should we do in a good way? I recognize that I am a white settler. I recognize that I am running an organization that is founded in colonial laws. And one of the things that they said was, through their heartbreak, They said, please, please make sure that it's not just this story and another story. Make sure that there's systemic change. Take a look at the system that is creating the conditions in which these kinds of things happen. So that's one of the things that we did as we got to know Colby and his family, was to ask not just what went wrong, but why did it go wrong? Our investigation into Colby's story points to a series of critical errors made by the Ministry of Children and Family Development, most notably a failure to complete basic prior contact and criminal record checks on the extended family caregivers, either before or after Colby and his siblings were placed in the home. Had these checks been completed, it's unlikely we'd all be here today for this purpose. Those errors were compounded by a lack of eyes on. He wasn't visited by his social worker for 7 months before he passed away. Once the children were in the home, MCFD failed to take action despite clear warning signs that the caregivers were overwhelmed and that Colby was gradually being isolated from family, health care providers, and school as the abuse escalated. All three of those things, the missed background checks, the lack of eyes on the children, and the lack of response to the concerns of family, medical, and educational professionals, contravene the most basic social work practices. But as I said, we looked deeper than that. Why might that be? So let's go back in time a little bit. Even before Colby was born, his family was let down by various elements of BC's child and family service systems. And when I say that, it's not just the Ministry of Children and Family Development, because when you think about it, we all have a responsibility for our children. His parents' underlying issues of trauma, violence, and substance use were not identified early and were not mitigated through supportive and appropriate services. After Colby was born with extremely complex healthcare needs that required a significant level of support, resources, and diligence, his family, living in poverty and dealing with the other serious challenges mentioned, was rarely properly supported to ensure that Colby's needs were met. His story also highlights other issues within systems of care. For example, while medical and educational staff attempted to raise concerns about not seeing Colby and his middle sister during the final 7 months of his life, their concerns were not acted upon, revealing a lack of effective interagency communication and coordination. We speak of the silos. A lack of communication and coordination was also evident in the way that the ministry worked with the nation and their department. Despite the fact that MCFD was legally responsible for the boy and his siblings, there was confusion between the nation, the department, and the ministry as to who was responsible for what. That confusion led to the lack of being heard and understood in order to plan well for the child. As I said, our work in this investigation is not about blaming and shaming or pointing fingers. That's not going to serve us. We've done that before, and it doesn't work. What it does is it alienates the workers that are trying very, very hard every day to do the best things for children, and it results in a system that gets responsive and starts to add policies and more procedures and more checks and balances rather than being in relationship with children. We identified more than 40 points in his life where opportunities were missed, intersectional opportunities with healthcare, with education, with daycare. That's on all of us. I got to tell you, I'm a little bit confused because my notes are not lining up with my slides right here. So just bear with me. You're going to see a lot of beautiful slides, kind of rush through for a moment. Okay, so that's Colby. That's his family. There was a lot of love, there was a lot of generosity, and there was a lot of pain and struggle. But Colby's story is not an outlier. Anytime I see a young life short, I'm overwhelmed with anguish. And sadly, that happens a lot. I spend a lot of time in this role, crying. This was an innocent young boy who should have had no worries except perhaps whether or not he would score a goal in his next soccer game or get to the next level of a video game. He should have been able to be happy, carefree. Instead, he became the center of headlines, homicide detectives meetings, and debates in the legislature. His bright smile was eclipsed by a dark, dark chapter in BC's child welfare history. And while I'd like to be able to say Colby's death is an outlier, it is not. Every month, the RCY receives hundreds of reports of critical injuries and deaths of young people in care or receiving government services. Last year, we reviewed 6,437 reports. About half of those met the threshold of being critical or life-altering injuries and deaths. For this report, we actually did a deep dive into 14 other children's stories from 8 families in order to better understand the teachings from Colby and the teachings from these other children. And we've pulled all of those together along with consultation and engagement of over 2,000, close to 2,000 people who've participated in many different ways with us, sharing what is working, what is not working, and what are the possibilities going forward. We commissioned 13 research papers that looked at each one of these systemic areas. And the result of that work is the other part of the story on Don't Look Away. Colby taught us many things, helped us understand what we needed to look at. We've looked at more deeply, and now we're here to think about what are the systemic changes that we need to move forward on. Key things that we addressed was intimate partner violence and family violence. The phenomenon of violence is profound. Family support, particularly in the early years or when the first cracks are appearing in a family in terms of what's going on for them. How to be helpful rather than wait until crisis and protection. We looked at interagency communication and coordination, interministerial, interagency, intersectoral, interdisciplinary, all of the inters, and how it is we could work together differently and what are the barriers that are getting in the way. We looked at the importance of accountability, not just the accountability of the individual workers, but what's the accountability of a system to make sure that it is doing the things that's actually making a difference in the lives of a child. Are we investing in the right ways? We looked at workforce capacity. We looked at loss, grief, and belonging, and we looked at the resumption of jurisdiction and how best to support that going forward, among other things. I'm going to speak briefly about several of these things and move us forward. First of all, one of the beautiful teachings from our engagement was speaking about children who have been exposed to violence or witnessed violence. And one of the things the participants said, children who are exposed to violence are experiencing violence. And we know from the data that affects their well-being, their brain development. It's critically important that we understand when children are exposed to violence, they are experiencing violence. No matter what other changes are made to BC's child and youth and family serving systems, if we don't address violence in families and communities, the impact of our other efforts will be minimized. And if we do not support healing from intergenerational and colonial violence, the impact of any other changes will be incomplete. This must be an all-in priority for compassionate action to get at the root causes that perpetuate conditions for violence in families, intimate partner and family violence. Both Indigenous and Western knowledge and research point to the importance of supporting families and ensuring that children, especially in their early years, receive nurturance, love, and care. So why are so many of our systems and programs waiting to intervene once vulnerability is more entrenched and developmental damage has already been done? If we know that we can shift a child's trajectory by focusing on the wraparound well-being of their family and community, why would we wait to act? As one of the advisors said, we've created a situation in which we're asking a child protection system to step into spaces where the rest of our systems have essentially failed. So if we were providing that early nurturance and that early support and the early guidance and help to families, then we wouldn't be in the situation where we are stepping in with protection. Colby's story also illustrated that it was very important that we pay attention to kinship care as well. That is increasingly being used in the province of British Columbia for many very good reasons. However, many of those kin carers are afraid of the system, are not getting the supports that they need, and are feeling very isolated and alone. The other area that we looked at was in the interconnection. So who is responsible, for example, when you've got a family that basically has, like Colby's, many different people involved in their lives, many responsibilities to try and navigate a system that is complex when you're trying to deal with all of the other things that are taking your energy and your spirit, like poverty, housing precarity, food insecurity. The beautiful thing is we actually saw many examples of deep caring amongst the professionals who were involved in Colby's life. And I want to stand up. There were medical professionals and educational professionals as well, who, albeit were on the side of all of this, have been deeply affected and impacted by this as well. On many occasions, their concerns for his well-being were brought forward to administrators, to social workers, caregivers, and in the hopes that there would be some action. Unfortunately, Colby's story and the other children's stories revealed that silos persist. There remains a lack of coordination, information sharing, and quite frankly, professional generosity and care and compassion for one another in this field. The other area that we took a look at was that of accountability. And some might say, oh, more measurement. But if we don't know what's happening for the well-being of children and how they're doing, then how will we know whether we're on the right track or not? How will we know that we're making a difference? How will we know where children stand right now and where we can go and where we need to move forward? So how do we help a system become more accountable? Well, it does require an understanding of what outcomes we desire and measurement of how far we're going towards that goal. And we can do that in a beautiful way and respect the many different ways of knowing and understanding about child well-being. Another area that we addressed was around workforce capacity, particularly within MCFD. And next week, 1 week from today, we will be releasing a report on workforce capacity specifically in MCFD. That is the first of 2 reports that we'll be addressing in that area because it's so important that those people who are providing the care and service to children within MCFD particularly are able to do that in a good way. We recognize that their workforce capacity is across the board, hence why we decided to take specific reports and release that separately next week. So where are we going here? So what we decided to do was a little bit different. As you know, many reports from our office, there are very specific recommendations, there are timelines, there's accountabilities to certain people. And we measure them. Every year, we'll measure their progress towards them. What we thought was we need to make a shift towards having collective responsibilities. This is not only an all-in across 9 different public bodies or ministries of government, secretaries of state and parliamentary secretaries and health authorities. That is true. But it's also about community sector. It's also around the ways in which we organize ourselves at the local level, the education system, the healthcare system, the justice system. If we want better outcomes for children and youth in BC, we can't get there by tinkering in an old system that was based on colonial mental models from the 1950s and 60s and that has ingrained certain ways of being that are deeply insidious. We have to create anew. So, the big collective responsibilities, and this is all in for us, is to shift our focus. We're waiting until bad things happen. Let's start talking about the well-being. And so we're asking government to lead the development of a child well-being strategy and action plan. And lest you say, oh my God, another plan. There are ways that we can use this that will help us all be accountable and will keep our focus on child well-being rather than default to the patterns that we know. The next area is around addressing violence. We have to see it. We saw too many instances of concealment, secrecy, normalization, the not talking about it, the workers being afraid to raise it. We have to see it and we have to name it. And then we have to support healing at the individual, family, and community level. And that's going to take some investments, but that's absolutely critical. Children should not be growing up experiencing violence. The third area is around supporting families in two key areas, one in early years in the 0 to 6, and the other area is what's called early help, what we're calling early help, which is when those cracks first appear, when a caregiver phones and says, I'm really overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. That's when we lean in, not after things have been broken. The other area that we're talking about is supporting those kinship carers, ensuring that they have equitable access to the supports, equitable as if the children were in foster care, for example. The other areas I've spoken about is we're talking about be accountable and developing a strong outcomes measurement framework in order to see how we're doing and where we're doing, and to do that across our system. There's great work being done in education, in health, in other areas, so let's work together on that. We've also said that it's critically important that we support the transition to jurisdiction. Many nations are looking forward to the opportunity to cut the colonial ties and create anew in accordance with their laws, their history, and to reclaim their right to raise their children in the way that they feel is necessary for the well-being of their community. We heard over and over again that healthy children are raised in healthy families are supported in healthy communities. So we have to work at all of those levels in order to create the opportunity, and that's where resumption of jurisdiction is going, is to create the conditions in which communities, families, and children can be healthy. But that can be tricky. It's not a matter of saying we're signing an agreement and off we go. It's a matter of walking alongside as allies and accomplices to make sure that the resources are there, that the transition is done in a really good way, to avoid those gaps that would have consequences for children if they get dropped. So, that's where we are. We also have a number of short-term recommendations, 6 to 12 months, and those are being directed to specific public bodies because there are things that can be done right now with the ways in which information is tracked, with the information that's shared with workers, with some discretionary funding to make sure that if hydro is going to be cut off, that's not the reason you take a child into care. You fix that. So where are we at now? What our commitment is at the RCY is we recognize that we too are part of the system, and we are making a commitment today and going forward to continue to host and gather and illuminate many of these issues in such a way that we can work together in order to move forward and make that action plan a reality. We're in it too. We are not separate from this system, and we have a responsibility to all of you and to the children as well. So I invite you, as we look forward, to think about what's your place, what's your contribution that you can make to the well-being of a child, whether it's the way you show up as an auntie or an uncle, or the way in which you show up as a policymaker or a decision maker, or the way in which you show up as a leader of an organization or a ministry. What's your commitment within the notions of respect, relationship, doing our work in a way that's relevant and responsible, doing our work in a way that supports one another in a spirit of reciprocity. And we are going to make mistakes, but when we do that, how are we going to repair? How are we going to make sure that the relationships are right again? I want to acknowledge, just before I pass on to Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, the incredible gift that I have had of a strong circle. We don't do this alone in RCY. We have so many people that want the best thing for kids and want us to do the best things for kids. So I'm grateful to that. I'm very grateful to Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, who will speak after me, who has been such a strong support since I went forward. And I also want to acknowledge Minister Lohr, who we will speak as well. It's not easy to hear that the ministry you're responsible for is struggling so much. It's not easy to hear the findings, but they're here. Many of the staff, our senior staff, are here. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have the conversations, because ultimately we can't go into our corners. We have to come back. We have to hear the hard things and have the hard conversations go forward. So, Grand Chief.
Oh my God. I usually go last. First of all, I want to acknowledge the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam peoples, on whose lands we have the privilege of gathering here today. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here, to be part of this very challenging journey that we've been involved with for a very, very long time. I am an apprehended child. I will be 75 years old in November. And I was raised in care from an infant until I aged out, until I left high school. And the family that I was placed with was a single family experience. And, I don't have any horror stories to tell about abusive treatment or anything like that. But there's something that's, far more insidious than being beaten every day. And that's the racism that exists within our society. It's an inherent part of North American social values, and it's been that way forever. And I certainly felt that as I was growing up, from the time of going to elementary school. High school, it was a little more pronounced. High school is where you discover girls, and you get enough courage up to make the approach, and you get a very subtle ew because you're Indian. And that wasn't kosher. And that was heartbreaking. But nonetheless, I persevered. I managed to get through high school. And an amazing thing happened to me. My father, who I had absolutely no connection with, no idea who he was, dropped out of the sky one day and showed up on my doorstep. And by that time I was married. I had 2 young girls. And, I was absolutely in a state of shock when I was told that he was waiting for me. And I'd heard all these horrible stories about our people, about how violent we are, how worthless we are, how lazy, and, we were drunkards, and, the stereotypes that we pass on to our children and grandchildren, unfortunately. So I met him, and he was absolutely an amazing individual. He was a cross between Doug Kelly and Willie. He was really solid. And he had these big Popeye arms. And being from Penticton, he always wore a short-sleeve shirt. And I spent about 6 hours across the kitchen table staring at those arms. But he had a classic brush cut. He had silver hair, and he was such a powerful presence. And his nickname in our community was Sarge. And from that moment, I realized I'd been lied to, that our people were not as I had been told. And I went home. And re-entry was very, very difficult. It was very traumatic. It exacerbated my already pronounced alcoholism. And I barely survived that experience of going back into the community. First of all, I was celebrated as being the last person to come home from my generation that was taken, to people being hugely jealous of the influence I had in the community and, the band office and so on and so forth, and elected to council, later elected as the chief and whatnot. We have been together, a lot of people in this room, since the Tawasin Accord, June the 10th, 2002. That's 22 years ago. And we came together because of the crises in our communities with respect to children dying in care. And there was a provincial-wide meeting called, and it was the first time that our organizations that were totally polarized at that point in our history over ideological issues, petty politics, personal conflicts, and we all came into the same room and talked about the situation. And we put together an accord, and that accord is very simple, but it still rings true today. And the principles of that accord guided us up to this point. And I'm very proud because the Tawasin Accord gave birth to another series of developments. The Leadership Council is a prime example, where organizations decided to come together and to commit to work together, respecting our separate mandates, but committing to work together on common issues. That was 18 or 19 years ago. And that's been the platform and the basis of our unity that has brought us to this point. But it doesn't mean that everything is rosy. We're in a state of crisis that's worsening, certainly beyond when I first came home. And there was a lot of domestic violence in our communities. It was, you'd drive through the community and you'd notice a bench, a padded bench in front of everybody's house on a little patch of lawn, and sprinkled all around the bench was weights. And you'd see people out there in muscle shirts pumping iron. And because there was so much violence, so many fights, and it wasn't uncommon to see two cars facing in the opposite direction, all the doors open, and people in the middle of the road fighting. That was the world I went back into. And I probably had the skinniest arms in the community, so I didn't do much of that fighting. But, we've made amazing progress over the last 22 years, and people need to understand it was not easy. Children and families is one of the most challenging issues, not only in our communities, but universally. We love our children so deeply, It's a universal value we carry as people. And it's so heartbreaking when, when these terrible things happen. But I believe that it takes an entire community to raise a child. And that community is not just the Indigenous community. That is the global community. And I think that's the element of magic that's happened in the last 22 years. I can tell you, we had some amazing challenges of working together just amongst our own groups and organizations. I can remember entering rooms being very happy about the work we're doing, and I looked around the room and I noticed there wasn't anybody small talk, there wasn't anybody smiling. And I thought, what's going on in here? I was all bubbly. And I found out that everybody in the room was just really, really upset with myself and, the work that we were doing, because there was not a collective voice. And it was so intense in that room that I put my hand up. As I looked around, I said, "Not guilty," and I thought it was funny. And so I laughed, and not a smile in the room. I thought, uh-oh. But at any rate, we managed to overcome, those differences, and came to the conclusion that there was a slide here. It says shift focus, child well-being strategy and action plan. Number 1. Number 6, support transition to jurisdiction, resources and time. That's upside down. The transition to jurisdiction for our groups, for our communities, for our families, for our culture, has got to center on jurisdiction. There is no other approach that will work. We have been, bogged down in the neo-colonial structures and principles and values, and it hasn't worked. So I am so happy to stand before you and know that we are making that shift to jurisdiction where we will, through law, through constitutional amendments, through legislative reform, will finally take over the jurisdiction of our children and families, which means that we also have to be accountable. And I was on our band council for 10 years, and then I became band chief for 14 years. I sat in that boardroom for 24 years, and I know band councils very well. Children and families would come up, and the majority of council said, whoa, that's not really our business. That's the family's business. We shouldn't interfere. And I think that's got to change. I think there's got to be legal obligations built into, our own levels of government that make us accountable. There has to be accountability for the parents. We need school boards that feature a duly elected board that's legally accountable, and health groups and so on and so forth. And until that happens, we're still going to have a lot of problems and issues. But I just want to close by saying that I am so grateful for the support and the partnerships and the friendships that we have developed over this journey. And we're talking about friendships that will last until we're no longer here. And there are so many important people that have been part of this journey as I look around this room. You know, I look to our senior statespeople, the Honorable Stephen Point and Gwen. You know, they're pretty much our prophets. You know, that we go up the mountain there, Mount Cheam or wherever, and, you know, seek some counsel from them. Grand Chief Willie Charlie has always been a very, very strong voice. Doug Kelly, not only a loud voice, not only a strong voice, but, you know, a very experienced voice in this issue. And we've had some difficult differences of opinion. I have so much gratitude for the women who have carried this movement. And there's so many. Judy Wilson was on our team for the UBCIC and pretty much carried this portfolio. Cheryl Kasmer, an amazing person, an amazing leader. You know, I don't think that lady sleeps. You know, if she's texting about some wording in an agreement, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? Who does that? Mary T.G., unbelievable. I love to see her stand and speak when we're at national meetings. You know, it's what put us here in front of you. And so I'm so grateful for everybody. I have been blessed, Joan and I, with 15 grandchildren. And I worry about them every single day. I was just looking for my granddaughter. The other day I was texting everywhere, have you seen her, have you seen her? And of course she's at her grandma's in Headley. And it makes me so mad that she doesn't stay in touch. You know, I'm thinking all these horrible things, what might have happened to her. But we love our children, we love our grandchildren, and we have got to wake up and understand what's going on in this world, what's going on south of the border, that extremism, that racialized hate, you know, all that negative energy. Our children are picking up on that. We had a horrible homicide in our community several weeks ago. And a young man, I think he was 26, lost his life. But what was most shocking was it was a younger generation of his relatives that had that gang mentality. That's what happened to him. He was trying to defend his brother from that little swarm and whatnot. So we have so much work to do. It's not easy work, but every single one of us, every single agency, every level of government needs to be part of this work. And for all of you that have, I am so grateful. Why? Lim Lim.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grace Lohr, and I have the incredible privilege and honor to serve as the Minister for Children and Family Development. I want to recognize the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people whose territory we're on this morning. It's an absolutely beautiful day out there, and I am incredibly grateful to be in this room with all of you today. I have had the opportunity to work alongside and learn from many of you over the last number of years, and seeing you this morning filled my heart with a lot of gratitude, with hope, and with some strength for the work. I've also had the chance over the last couple of speakers, Dr. Charlesworth, Grand Chief, to watch you nod along, to listen, to feel. I need to start this morning by thanking the elders, by thanking Grand Chief, by thanking Dr. Charlesworth, and all of you who participated in this incredibly difficult, incredibly important work. Thank you for the opportunity to hear you this morning as you reflect on the work and on yesterday's ceremony. I want to acknowledge in particular the family, friends, and community who loved Colby and who shared their precious memories of him. He loved soccer and playing video games and reading comic books. As Dr. Charlesworth said, he was eager to learn and caring to all of those around him. And like every other child in our province, Colby deserved safety, belonging, and love. And what happened to him is unimaginable. There are not words for what he endured. His story is devastating, but we must hear it. We cannot look away. As minister and on behalf of the provincial government, I want to apologize because it is clear Colby and his family were failed. There are so many lessons to learn from Colby's story, from Colby's history, to help us improve how we support children like him and families like his. And we must learn these lessons because it could have been different. There were so many times a different decision, action, or support could have helped his family and may have changed his story. As minister and as a mom, I have held Colby's story close. I cannot begin to describe or imagine the pain and loss his family and community have and continue to experience. This loss, grief, and trauma is shared by those who love Derek, Hillary, Tyson, and the others whose stories this report shares. Each of these stories, woven throughout the report, weigh heavy on me every single day, as they should for each and every one of us, and they demand action. We must rise together to make the critical changes that the histories, the lives, and the deaths of these children demand. For years, we worked hard to strengthen the system and care for children and youth, but it is clear from this investigation that the system failed Colby's family. Across the province, there are so many incredible people working hard and with their hearts every day in our ministry, with Indigenous-led family services, and in our communities. And there are so many extended families and foster parents who are providing care and love to children and youth who need it most. And yet, it is clear that Colby's family did not have the care, support, and safety that they, like all families, deserved. We must do better. We must step into this circle. Colby's family and community experienced the impact of colonialism and intergenerational trauma and violence of residential schools, of the 60 Scoop and more, the immediate and long-term impacts of the racism that Grand Chief shared, and they fell through cracks in and between so many services. healthcare, education, housing, and others. And in some cases, Colby's family fell through these cracks many times before coming into contact with the child welfare system. The story of Colby and his family could have been different if they had had what they needed when they needed it. And for that, I am sorry. Dr. Charlesworth says in her investigation that we must fundamentally shift our thinking. And I agree. And I know you agree because I saw you nod and I saw you hear. We have to do better. Kids need us to get it right. Colby needed us to get it right. It's time for fundamental change that focuses more on providing families with increased supports so that children and youth have what they need to be safe, healthy, and thriving. It's time for a greater focus on prevention. And we must work to improve how we address intimate partner, gender-based, and family violence. Patterns of violence are too often the common thread in so much of what we see in these stories. And we heard children who witness violence experience violence. Too many women are experiencing violence by men in their homes and in communities. And as the story and histories of these children show us, when families are experiencing violence, when women are not safe, neither are children. As minister, I stand with Dr. Charlesworth, with Indigenous leadership, with advocates, with the voices in this room. We need to change how we think, how this vital work is done, and how we show up for families. And this work cannot wait. We are committing today to a new vision for child welfare in this province, one that prioritizes child and family well-being, one that works in collaboration with First Nations, Indigenous partners, community and service providers, caregivers, and those with lived and living experience. A new approach that will take all of government working together, guided by the work of the representative and her team. We will build a system that focuses more on prevention, on support, on care. One that helps kids, especially Indigenous children and youth, stay connected with families and in community, that supports, uplifts, and recognizes jurisdiction. And when kids do come into care or into the care of their nation or cared for by relatives, we all need to make sure that we do absolutely everything in our power to keep kids safe, loved, and connected to culture and community. We will build a system that is more proactive, that is more flexible, that meets people where they are at. Most importantly, we will build a system that better prioritizes prevention, care, support, and love. And where the shared goal in this room is to lift up families. This work starts today. A cross-government committee to make sure that vulnerable children and youth and families are always at the center of our decision-making. Right now, there is important work underway across government to rebuild and strengthen services that kids and families need. But services need to be better connected. They need to be better coordinated. The stories of the children and families in this report highlight that there were barriers preventing some people from sharing concerns and information that could have helped keep kids safe. I am determined to break down those barriers so that when people who are working with families, like a teacher or a healthcare worker, have a concern, they can share information and know who to share it with. We're also going to break down barriers that families are facing. Too many families navigate a maze of services on their own. We're going to make it easier to access services that meet the fundamental needs of families, from housing and substance use support to income assistance and employment services. As guided by this report's recommendation and toward a new vision for children and families, we will work across ministries to address the causes and ongoing impacts of family and gender-based violence, especially for Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit people, and children. We will be examining the separation of family support from child protection functions to help prioritize protection and so that people are not afraid to ask for help. A government-wide plan for children and youth, as asked for by the representative, will be created to guide this work. And an outcome-based framework will make sure that we are actually able to measure child well-being across government, and so that we know the actions we're taking are working to improve the lives of the most vulnerable kids and families. We will be exploring the reconfiguration of child and family services across ministries, including child and youth with support needs and mental health services. Finally, we are working on exploring the creation of an Indigenous-led body to support Indigenous governing bodies with the resumption of jurisdiction. I have spoken to Premier Eby, and this work will be happening at the highest levels of government because it cannot wait. We'll be establishing a cross-ministry group of senior public officials to guide the development of new direction throughout the fall and map out new strategies across government, again, focused on outcomes and prevention. To tackle some of the biggest challenges in a system that did not do what Colby's family needed it to do, we will seek guidance from Indigenous leadership, partners, and community to make sure that we get it right. It's been said a number of times before, we cannot do this work alone. These changes cannot wait. Colby, Tyson, Hillary, the violence, the loss, the trauma, their histories call us to action now. And as minister, as a mom, and as the representative of the provincial government here today, my commitment is to act. And I acknowledge this work is not going to be easy, and it is not going to happen overnight, but it must happen. The work is one of the ways that we honor Dahlia, Riley, Presley, and Madeline, and all the children whose stories are shared in the investigation. Every single child in our province deserves safety, love, and belonging. I want to take another moment to thank the representative for welcoming me here today. I'm here for the hard conversations. I'm here for this work together. I am not interested in being in our corners. Learning about the life of Colby and all the ways his life could have been different is heart-wrenching. But individually and collectively, we cannot look away. We have been called to look. We cannot look away from Freddie, Annabella, Tanya, Aaliyah, Jessica, Julia, or Chantel. I want to also express my gratitude to First Nations Leadership Council, Our Children Our Way Society, Métis Nation BC, community partners, service agencies, advocates, caregivers, and every single one of you who has made space and time to be here today in this room or virtually to receive these sacred stories. Thank you.
Oh my God. Grand Chief just apologized for his Biden moment.
Could have been the other guy.
Gisugyukiat kapiniskil hu sukith kuknina sumiatki, hu kaklik ak smaknik bitsak balki, Hu Sukafgukni Guwam, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, Squamish, Amuckus. Good morning, everyone. I'm Cheryl Casmer. I'm political executive with the First Nations Summit. I'm also a citizen of the Tanakh Nation. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a sister, and an auntie. I have 5 grandchildren, 3 adult children, and my grandchildren are ages 8 to 20. And I'm looking forward to going home later today, as I've been on the road for a while, to be able to spend a few days with 3 of my grandchildren anyways, starting tomorrow. I need to spend that time with my grandchildren. I need to get grounded, and I need to feel their love, and I need to give love and hugs and kisses, so that it gives me the strength to carry on to do this important work. I want to also start off by acknowledging the important and heavy work that our elders and our cultural advisors have been doing these last few days. And it hasn't just been these last few days, it's been quite a journey for them, doing a lot of this heavy work, heavy lifting, to make sure that we're safe, to make sure that we're grounded in doing a lot of this important work. I also want to send my love and my prayers to members of Colby's family, to his nation and to his community, and to the people who love him, and the people that are healing from this tragic loss. I also want to take an opportunity to acknowledge my colleagues from the First Nations Summit, political executive Hugh Breaker, who's in the audience, as well as co-chair Ray Harris, who's here joining me as well. I participated in the healing session yesterday, and it was quite powerful. And I want to hold up RCY and her team of investigators, her team of researchers, for being courageous and brave in doing this important work and coming up with this report of Don't Look Away. I'm a former child in care and a residential school survivor. In my era, and there's many of you here in the same space, it was all about children are to be seen and not heard. Well, we don't live there anymore. I had to find my voice one day after being beaten in the morning a day before school, me and my siblings. And it was horrible. And I had to go to school and I had to find my voice because I needed to do something, not only to protect myself, but to protect my siblings. And so I could no longer just be seen. I needed to be heard as a child. And that's what we need to ensure happens in this process or any other process that we have. We need to make sure that we have children's voices in any discussion that has anything to do with them. We need to amplify those voices and create the spaces where they're able to say, hey, something's not right here. I need help. We need to change that narrative. I appreciate the recommendations that are being put forward, and I appreciate everyone who contributed to the development of those recommendations. But what's going to be more important from here on in is how we implement those recommendations. And it's been stated already that it cannot be left to the Ministry of Child and Family Development. It is going to take all of us to make sure that we can implement these recommendations to the fullest. What is this little child's legacy going to be? And as I stand here looking out towards you, it's you. It's me. It's everyone up here. It's each and every one of us responsibility to make sure that we take his history and those other children who form a part of this report, and we make the changes necessary to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And I know we've been saying that for so many times, and we've been receiving so many reports. But I think that we need to ensure that government, departments, agencies, anybody who has anything to do with the life of a child has to be in the same room and on the same page to make sure that we're working in collaboration towards the well-being of children. We can no longer be working in silos. And that continuously happens, but we need to change that, and we need to change that today. And so I'm very happy to hear Minister Lohr in her commitments to talk about setting up a cross-ministry group of senior officials and others who will be coming together and be working on a plan, a strategy on how they're going to make fundamental change and fundamental shifts to the archaic colonial system that currently exists. And it's critical that not only do they include the voices of First Nations title and rights holders in this exercise, but they need to include the voices of the children who are currently in care and those that are former children in care. We also need to make sure that partners that are going to be a part of this are also fully committed. For example, just over a year ago, my grandchildren came into my care. And I couldn't even imagine what it's like for a parent who doesn't have the network that I have to try to navigate and maneuver through this complex system. It was hard for me. I can't even imagine what it's like for others. But one of the areas that certainly needs to have significant change is the justice system. You take little kids' lives, you impact it negatively by removing them from their family, from their mom and dad and their siblings. And it goes to a foreign system of justice that makes a determination about whether, when, and how children are going to be able to go back to their mom and dad. And you can sit there all day waiting for that decision to happen, and at the end, they say, we've run out of time. We have to adjourn, we have to put this to another day, which usually is about 6 weeks to 2 months down the road. And then I have to go home and tell my grandchildren, can't see your mom and dad yet. And see the heartbreak in their faces when you do that. We need to change the justice system, and they need to be full partners, as well as education, as well as housing, as well as poverty reduction. All the partners that RCY had mentioned, they need to be a part of the solution rather than continuing to be part of the problem. I know that we have a looming election that's in the back of our mind about how soon are we going to be able to put these recommendations in place. Again, I'm happy to hear Minister Lohr make a commitment that she's going to work on this along with the support of Premier Eby to have this happen as soon as possible. And we have a responsibility to make sure that we hold the ministry's feet and the Premier's feet to the fire to make sure that that in fact is the case. Children cannot wait until after an election. They need the changes now, and they need the changes today. I can guarantee you that there is a child somewhere, whether he's Indigenous or non-Indigenous, who is waiting for somebody to step up for them right now. There is a child somewhere today who is hungry, who is being hurt, who is suffering from mental health issues, who is hoping an adult or someone is going to come along and help them. And I know that because I was one of them. A new system is going to demand accountability on all parties. That's including government, agencies, departments, our partners, and including First Nations. I helped set up the agency that currently exists in my nation many, many years ago. And although we are doing good work, and we have shifted the way that we do work to the model that is being proposed today, we still need to make sure that we are accountable. We need to remain accountable to the families and to the children that we serve. And we need to be accountable to our leadership. We always call on the ministries, whether it's child and family, or whether it's housing, or whether it's education, or whether it's health, as leaders, we're always pounding on the table, asking for that accountability. But we also need to make sure that we're also accountable. That's the only way it's going to work, when we are all on the same page. And when we talk about changing the system, I'm not just talking about changing the area related to First Nations or Indigenous children. I'm talking about the entire system. There are non-Indigenous kids out there that need help too. There are non-Indigenous kids out there who are screaming for an adult to care or to hear their voice. When we say all children matter, it is all children. In closing, I just wanted to, again, hold up my hands to everyone who played a role in this report. And I give you my commitment as a member of the Leadership Council that I will do everything in my power to be able to continue advocating fiercely for these changes. Anytime I have a chance to sit at a table with any ministry, I don't care if it's Ministry of Lands and Resources or Water or Environment or whoever, everyone has a responsibility. If we're talking about a whole of government approach, that means everyone. And I will make sure that they are fully aware of this story, of this history. And I will also make sure that they are committed to fulfilling each and every one of these recommendations. As I've stated already and numerous times, we can't keep waiting. Those kids that are out there right now, they can't keep waiting. They can't afford to wait any longer. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you, and I look forward to continuing to work with Dr. Charles Worth and all of the leadership in this province so that we can realize the real change that needs to happen on the ground, so that one of the ways of measuring child well-being in our communities is when we look at the child's smile on their face and the sparkle in their eye. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good morning. My name is Mausham Gabu. That is my hereditary chief's name. That is White Wolf. I come from Takla Nation. I come from the Lachkibu clan, the Wolf clan. I come from the House of Negep. I am Takla, proud member of Takla Nation, and I am Giksan and Carrier. First of all, as our law dictates, I would like to acknowledge the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish Nations for allowing us today on this beautiful day to conduct this very important business in your sacred lands, in your territory. I am the chair of the Indigenous Child and Family Services Directors Forum, an honor I've held for many years. I'm also the president of the BC Aboriginal Child Care Society. I represent British Columbia on the National Advisory Committee for Child and Family Service Long-Term Reform. I'm sure you've heard all of the news lately around the proposed $47 billion. I also represent British Columbia on the First Nations Caring Society, and none other than the one that leads that society, of course, is none other than the champion of our children, Dr. Cindy Blackstock. I am so honored to be here, and I thank you, Dr. Charles Worth, for inviting me here to sit with this prestigious panel and to be amongst all of you. I cannot even begin to tell you how many times my heart broke when I first heard the story, and reading the report again last night and reviewing it again this morning. I think of all the courageous researchers and the circle of advisors that have worked on this for months. My hands go up to you, and for all of us, we would like to thank you. I would like to acknowledge, all of the ones that have been doing this work for years and years and years. I've been in this role as the Executive Director for Child and Family Services for Carrier Sekani Services for over 20 years. And I look around the room and I see so many of you that have been in this field. I look at Bart Knutsgaard, my very own Bart, I call him, because he has always come to do the good work, to make sure that we are doing right by our children when it comes to practice and policy, and making me think another way sometimes. I look to my staff, who I'm so proud to be able to have worked with you for over 25 years. She's been here with me for over 20 years, but she's been in this field for over 25 years, and she's a director of prevention for family support, and I think you represent the best of us. I think about all the workers that are in the communities, in our nations, that have never had the capacity or the resources to do the good work they want. Everybody in this room, everybody that is doing work in child welfare, are doing it not by chance, but by choice. And the choice is not yours. The choice comes from the Creator. The Creator saw something in each of you to take up the tools and the talents that you have to better the lives of children. He saw something in you, and you've chose to come and do the good work. And for that, that is commendable. I want to talk today about accountability. I want to talk about solutions. I want to talk about challenges. There's so much that we need to say. But first and foremost, I want to honor this young man and all those that are mentioned in the report, and to give condolences, my sincerest condolences, to the family and to the nation that suffered the loss. I want to make sure that Victoria, the mother's name, is not forgotten. She is no longer with us, but there is no harder loss than the loss of a child. Trust me, I know. And for her to go through what she's gone through in her life, and tried to no avail to get the help she needed. We talk about the impacts of residential schools so much that it's become trite because nothing has been done that we see. And so when we talk about this report and we look at why did this happen, we cannot lose sight of colonization. We cannot lose sight of the residential school. We talk about reconciliation, and I always say that's a misnomer, because it's not reconciliation that we're working towards. It's an assumption, reconciliation, there's an assumption that there was a good, balanced, harmonious relationship at one time. We never had that with any level of the Crown. What we are trying to do is build a conciliatory relationship, one that is based on mutual respect, of honoring each other, and of listening, and of trusting. And how do we come to that relationship of conciliation, of trust, is by ensuring that we are accountable. And this is what we need to talk about, is accountability. There was an accountability of MCFD to ensure that that Colby and all the other ones were safe, that we needed to look to the workers, that there was practice standards that were not met, that there was a commitment from the government. How many commitments did we have? How many reports do we have where every minister and every level of government said we commit to do better? And yet here we are yet again today. We also have to think about the accountability for us as Indigenous people and for our nations, as hereditary chiefs, as leaders, as family. There's an accountability and a responsibility that we have to uphold. We also have to think about, first and foremost, the accountability and the responsibility that we hold as a society. There's an old adage that says we are only as strong as our weakest member. Think about that today. Colby is no longer with us because we failed him. When we talk about solutions, one of the things that we have to do, and I firmly believe, is that we have to be very, very clear about what the problem is, what the challenges are, to come up with the best solutions. And in order to do that, we need all our minds together and all our hearts together to say, these are the problems, these are the challenges. As chair of the Indigenous Directors Forum, we have been saying this forever. The agencies were created and developed because of the leadership of the day saying enough is enough. We want to have a say in what happens to our Indigenous children. We didn't have the resources to do the work that we wanted. And so what did we do all those years ago? We took Canada to court to end the discrimination against First Nations children on reserve because we did not have prevention dollars, especially here in British Columbia. Canada was proven to be discriminatory against First Nations children. And so that is one of the wrongs that we are trying to right today. And that is what the province of BC needs to do, is to follow what has been stated in the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. That would be a simple first action item to ensure that all children, regardless if they live off or on reserve, are achieving substantive equality, that they are able to live up to their full potential. The United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People is not just for adults. Those are the rights of an Indigenous child. So when we talk about jurisdiction, we have to put our children right at the core. I've always said this, we've always had the inherent right to take care of our children. What we have not had are the resources to breathe life into our own laws. Until now, we have funding flowing finally into our communities. We have the funding to provide preventative, to provide prevention activities. We have the ability now to develop our own laws under the hard-fought establishment of what we call C-92. We are living in unprecedented times. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented actions. And this report is one of the ways that we are going to travel true to the North Star. It is an unprecedented action, and it's an unprecedented commitment from the minister to say, that we are going to be working together. We have been asking for this for decades, and I feel hope after listening to Minister Lohr. All of us, it's a responsibility, it's a sacred responsibility that we are in our roles. And we have, as leaders, we have to ensure that we keep that sacred responsibility close to our heart, that we cannot let politics get involved of what the child needs in our community. I remember years ago when an elder had said, there's so much work for us to do. We can't be fighting about who's going to do what. We just all do it together because there's so much work. It's taken us generations to get into this place where we aren't able to take care of our children. It's going to take us generations to get out of that place. And so we must remember that it's all of us together. As agencies, as a chair of all the Indigenous Child and Family Services agencies, I commit to you what we've always been committed to make sure that no child ever falls through the cracks. We know about the Gove inquiry. We talk about the Hughes report, all the different reports. We know, research has shown this, when there is change in policy in government, even if it's good change, children fall through the cracks. So now we must really uphold our sacred responsibility to take care of those children while we are transitioning to a new dawn, a new era of jurisdiction. We all have to do that together. If you don't have the capacity in community, because we haven't had those prevention dollars in community in BC until about 2018, 2019, ask your neighbor, ask the agency, tell the ministry this is what you need. Because it's not about us. It's ensuring that every child has the ability to live up to their full potential. We know better. The time is now to remember that the words of all those past reports contain the spirit of all those we lost. We cannot dishonor those spirits by allowing their words and those reports to sit neglected, gathering dust on some shelf. We know better. We have reports, we have research that shows this. In the audience, we have a phenomenal woman and that works for the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, Dr. Helena Gaspard, her and Dr. Kevin Page, that took up the work to look at what does a well child or a well community. They developed the Measuring to Thrive Outcomes Indicators framework. So we have a way, we have a foundation to look at what do we need to do to ensure every Indigenous child, every child lives up to their full potential. What are we talking about when we're talking about well-being? Well, we have started that work. And so that is important to not think that we're starting from scratch, everybody, that we have all of you as educators, as counselors, as social workers, as administrators. We have lots of good work, and it's pulling that together and saying, okay, we already know this. Where are we? And so that we know where we're going. And most important, we also have to listen to our children. Cheryl Casimir talked about that. We have to listen to our children because they know what they need. And we never forget that our most important resource is our children. In British Columbia, I used to be a negotiator for the treaty. I used to be a deputy chief. And I know how hard we fought for forestry, for mining, for all of this. And it's that same fervor and that same fight that we must take up to protect our most important resource, and that is our children. I think about some of the words of the children, and I think about one of the ones in the last few years who talked about a former child in care who said, you know what? I don't have the ability to feel safe every night when I fall asleep on the street, so I don't dream anymore. Could you imagine something that we take for granted to dream? So what we did, and this is a good example, what we did is we worked with our sister agency, Nasal Bay Child and Family Services. We worked with the Friendship Center. We worked with BC Housing, and we worked with MCFD, however, a little bit reluctantly. And we worked with Indigenous Service Canada. And what we did is we built a post-majority wraparound supportive housing units for these young people, and we named it Our Place to Dream. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented actions. And these actions have to be built on those principles of honor and respect and trust. But above all, these actions have to be built upon the most important principle that we all share, and that's of love. Again, I would like to leave you with the words of a young boy, a child in care. And I say this often, but it bears repeating, who said he dreamt of a day when he only had to read about the impacts of colonization in residential school, not have to live it. In this case, Colby unfortunately had to die from those impacts and as our failing from a society. And we have to learn from history. I know that our work will never be done until such time as we never lose another child in the way that we lost Colby. I know that the words of that young boy of dreaming of a day, never having to feel the impacts of residential school, it's incumbent on all of us to make that dream a reality. Today we're in this room and we are making history. I want you to take a look around and see who's in this room. And I want you to remember that you are the ancestors of those not yet born, and they will speak of you. Take a moment in your heart and in your spirit to ask, what will they say? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it is, I recognize I'm the last speaker after some very, very powerful voices, and so I will be very brief. My name is Dr. Bonnie Henry. I serve as the Provincial Health Officer here in British Columbia. And I don't know if you noticed when you came in today, but there's these cards about sacred teachings, and there's these beautiful paddles that were carved, and I think you were invited to take one. And when I took one yesterday when we were doing the work in the circle, my word was responsibility. And I think that is why I'm here. And it has been, I've been very grateful. It's been very emotional and very much an honor to be part of the Circle of Advisors for the RCY and for the team in doing this important work. And I reflect that no one does it alone. We talk a lot about that in my office, in the work that we're doing. And it was very important for us yesterday to recognize that we can't do this alone and that we need you and we need all of us to commit to doing this important work. But we need to do it in a thoughtful way. We need to do it in a way that doesn't cause more harm. And we've heard how sometimes that can happen when we make fundamental change. So we all need to be committed to not letting children fall through that cracks. The past is still with us, and it is, as we have heard, shaping what is happening today with our children, with our families, with our communities, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, and I think that is important as well. I've also been very struck, and people have heard me say this before, that the traumas that we collectively went through in the last 4 years with the pandemic, it had differentially negative impacts on children. Much of it was the work, the measures that we put in place to reduce the impact of the virus. And I am very concerned that we have seen the increase in anxiety and mental health and challenges in children and youth. And so this is a call for us to look at how do we support those children, all of our children, and make the changes in our systems to show that we are trustworthy in our systems and can support the children. We have obligations to address these issues for all of our children. And I'm here today to commit to my office doing our role to supporting Minister Lohr, and I am so grateful for the words that you said today and to hear you talk about the fundamental changes we need to make. And we're here to be part of that. I'm here to take my responsibility in ensuring that that happens, and I commit to all of you and to all of you that we will not look away. Thank you.
Hello.
There we go. I hold my hands up to each one of the speakers that have spoken in the last little while. It was very, very heartfelt to hear the words, to hear the work that needs to take place by each and every one of us that's sitting here. And I humbly respect Grand Chief Willie Charlie to come say a few words, if you could, please.
Siamen Siaya, Sialachwa, Etisiwas, Etisiayas, Kwasailab to Musqueam, Squamish, Sabletooth, Solchomach, to Chachatamach to E. Just to introduce myself as Grand Chief Willie Charlie, or Grand Chief Chasta. Just wanted to acknowledge each and every one of you, acknowledge our elders for sharing your good teachings, for leading this work this morning. Just as well acknowledging the Musqueam and the Squamish and the Sabletooth for allowing this work to happen here today. just really thank you for your work, all of those that have had a hand in picking up some of this work. I'll share lots going through my mind, and I'll try my best to get it out in a meaningful way and a contributing way. Really want to acknowledge our leadership at home. They say our most precious resource is our children. Our children have inherent rights to know who they are and where they come from and what they belong to. We only hang on to them for a little while we're here so that they have it. Really acknowledge Chief Gibby Jacobs. And I always use one of the things that he had said when he was standing up, and he said, as the chwilmach, we're like the shwuchwith, like that woven blanket, that Siam's blanket. We're like the shwuchwith on Chachatumach that sits on top of Mother Earth. We're all connected and we're all related. And we all kind of need to be with each other. And so I think about that. And I wanted to acknowledge those of you that looked after yourself yesterday for doing this heavy work. I will see if it's good work. I think only time will tell us if it's good work. If the recommendations that are in there and the commitments to working together and to working with the title and right holders, to working with our communities, if those recommendations are inclusive and we make some progress together, then it's good work. Other than that, it's going to be a report that sits on the shelf. There's lots of good reports sit on the shelf, good recommendations that never get implemented. So we'll see. Time will tell if it's good work. And I think it calls upon all players, the governments, not just of British Columbia, but of Canada. And when we were doing some other work, of course, I shared my opinions and my thoughts around the colonial system that has had significant contributions to the situation that we're talking about. It's not just a one-off. And you think about the impacts of the Indian Act, the colonial systems. Yeah, think about the impacts of residential schools and of the 60s scoop and the millennial scoop that has impacted our children and our families and those that you see today in the system, whether it's in children and families or in health or in prison. They're that way for a reason. It's not just now, not just this case. How many years has that Indian Act been on us? When you think about the family, I acknowledge that you looked after yourself, but I was really expressed myself, and I'm worried. I'm very concerned. You looked after yourself for your part of the work. But what about those families? Those families that are left behind. And it's not just one family. We're woven together. These connections, they go right to Musqueam. They go right to Squamish. The families that are impacted by this go right through the Fraser Valley. They go beyond our provincial boundaries. They're all impacted by this. And what about them? You look after yourself. Who's going to be left behind to pick up some of those pieces as you tear off this Band-Aid, the trauma that's been impacted by this case? Now that you brought it out again, you're re-traumatizing them. And so those are the ones that I'm worried about. And what kind of tools are they going to have? What kind of tools and resources are the communities that are left behind to pick up the pieces going to have? And so we'll see if this is good work. And I appreciate the efforts and the intent of it. But again, I think we really have to, how deep is that commitment? I will see. And I'll judge myself whether the government has been sincere or not. And we lose lots of sleep because we live in our community. We talk to these families every day. And so those are some of the things I think about the commitment about going forward, and I appreciate us youth for saying where we need to kind of start with jurisdiction. And we're negotiating some of that now. Some of the discussions come up about, well, who's going to pick up the bill for this part of the agreement and this part of the agreement? Holy, doesn't that feel like a Jordan's principle? Then we think about, the government of Canada. This is not just British Columbia. Where does Canada stand with this? So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we identify our children? The impacts of that Indian Act, Indian registry system tells you who's your status Indian in your community. And our inherent rights don't come from a band number, 559. Your inherent rights come through your bloodline. Those children have an inherent right to know who they are, where they come from, and what they belong to. Now the government's saying Government of Canada only wants to recognize those that are registered through the Indian Registry, through the Indian Act? Like, really? This archaic, this colonial system needs to change, and it needs to include the First Nations voices. And I agreed with a lot of the report, except for the part that there was some confusion about some roles and responsibilities, including the nations. The nation's voice and roles need to be recognized by governments for what it is. And so I think that's where we need to kind of start. Put some weight on the word of the nations and of those that advocate for their people, instead of always pushing us aside for whoever you stand up to speak for. And I'm really, really concerned about those that are left. And I understand you have some advisors, and those that are Coast Salish, you understand a little bit of our grief cycle. We haven't let this young man rest yet, and we're keeping him in limbo, and we're holding him here. And they can't fully go to the spirit world until we release him. And every time we cry for him, every time we grieve for him, every time we mourn for him, every time we get angry about what has happened to him, we're keeping him here. This report is keeping him here. And we have a process in our Coast Salish way around a ceremony that helps us to release them, to dry our tears, so that we can get on with the work in front of us. Because if you're heavy with grief, or if you're angry, or if you're hurt and frustrated, and that consumes your life, then you can't carry on with what's left for you here. You have other responsibilities and other obligations and other children to look after. But if you haven't got through that healing part, then how do you do that? So the report, I think, is a bit premature. We should have helped and supported that family that was left behind to heal first, to dry their tears first. But because of political pressures, because of this colonial system, because of whatever else, you want the report to come out this quick. Think about the family. You're all looking after yourself. You're all impacted. Put yourself in their shoes. I really hope that you have as much belief in prayer as I might, that you think about those that are left behind. Pray however you pray for those that are left behind. And those that have to help them, that they have the courage and the strength and the resources to support them the way they need to. And so thank you for allowing me to share a few words. I was wondering if I was going to have to stand up and speak anyway, but I appreciate you asking me to get up and share a little bit. And I again thank each and every one of you. I hope that this is good work. I hope and pray that the results of this report are good. Just writing it is only a part of it. What you do with it will show us. And that includes the RCY. Yeah, so there's been some reports that have hindered us along the way. Great, but they throw up flags, and those flags become stumbling blocks. Help us. So I always say, you stand up and tell people, I don't like to take direct action. If I do, jump up and down and pound the table or make noise. Feels like we're not being heard. When I get people's attention, then I'll try to tell you something meaningful to contribute, to support the work along the way. So that would be my advice for the RCY. You've cut the attention, now what are you going to do with it? So hopefully you leave the table open for the rest of us to come to the table and help it along the way. Want to thank all of the speakers for your good words, and I think I felt some sincerity in your commitments, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
We're here. We're here. We're here. When you don't look away, the path forward is clear. When you don't look away, your heart fills with the energy that you need to go along that path. Spirit, new ancestor. Colby's our new ancestor. It's going to guide us. It's going to help us not to look away. Not going to look away. I heard these wonderful speakers talk about their commitment. Means they're not looking away. I want to say to the witnesses, if it's in your hearts to stand up and say what you heard, what you've seen, and what you felt today, then please come forward and say the words.
Amachich Look, good morning. My name is Tendetten Tukwil Alugigat. It's a Niska name bestowed on me at a feast. I belong to the Killawale clan, the House of Wisin Speak. A member of the Niska Nation. My name is Leslie Varley, and I'm also the Executive Director at BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centres. Thank you, Jennifer, for asking me to be a witness today for this important solemn occasion. And thank you, Minister Lohr, for connecting with me and giving me a heads up that you plan to implement and not take back this report for consideration. I really appreciate those words in that phone call. Like many of you, I sat and read the report yesterday, or the summary yesterday, and had a good cry. It's not often that tears come to my eyes, but that was I felt so bad for the family and the community and for Colby and for his mom. In my own experience, I've witnessed women, family members enduring horrific abuse in my extended family, in my community. Many times when I was a child, witnessing my family members, my aunts and uncles coming home from residential school full of rage. The men would be punching each other out up and down the streets, and the women we'd be just raging. And we all endured that as children. We witnessed that and endured that as children. And we were afraid, and we didn't feel safe. In my work life, I've experienced extreme verbal abuse at meetings. I've been called a squaw by federal government officials. These things didn't really bother me. It didn't bother me to be raged at an Indigenous political meeting. I was at a meeting once where I was raged at, and the leader of that meeting sent me an apology bouquet of flowers, a big, big, beautiful bouquet of flowers. And I said to him later, geez, kind of feel like an abused woman with a big apology bouquet of flowers. And that chief, who I deeply respect, said that was abuse, and he apologized to me again. I happen to know that the person that was raging at me at that meeting was a man who was deeply, deeply, horrifically abused as a child, another Indigenous man. And I couldn't have any anger or rage towards him because I was amazed that he was still alive, actually. He had endured so much abuse. At other meetings, I've been called a witch. In front of dozens of Indigenous people. I've been told to ride off on my witch's broom, get out of here, came with a gesture. No one said a thing. No one said a single thing at that meeting. No one held that person accountable. No one came and said, geez, that must have felt awful to me. People were afraid to speak out against an angry, raging leader. I stand here today for our collective responsibility to address violence against Indigenous women and children. Every single one of us has a responsibility to address the violence in our communities and in our organizations. And I'm speaking to the Indigenous community members here today. I know this is really, really difficult. It's difficult for me to say, I'm trying to hold a piece of cedar, my legs are shaking, but it is time for us. There is much for government to do. There is much for us to do. There is more for us to do. We have our own work to do. We have to help ourselves if we're going to help our children. The culture of a family is shaped by the behavior of the parents and the extended family and the community. The culture of an organization is shaped by what the behavior or what behavior the leaders are willing to tolerate. It's time to address our internalized violence that was brought home to us from residential schools, that we endure every time we walk outside our own homes and deal with racialized Canada. We can and must change our family and our organizational cultures to enable each of us to feel safe. Our children watch and learn from our behaviors. Their eyes are always on us. I pray that the report about Colby, and I pray that the report about his mother, including his mother, this is the last report that we have to gather together and review. And I pray that all Indigenous parents and people and community members are supported to develop a culture of safety for Indigenous women and children. Thank you.
It's a tremendous honor to have been asked by elders and Indigenous leaders in the room to be a witness, and I'm learning about this sacred practice of witnessing the sacred business of today. It's a tremendous honor to be here on Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish territories. And my name's Johnny Morris. I have the privilege of leading the Canadian Mental Health Association here in the province, and we care deeply about the mental health of all people across these lands. Today I listened, and I took those instructions very seriously to listen and in many ways play my part to rescue the words, hold on to the stories beyond the time that business is adjourned today, and to bear witness to a really important process. So what an honor. So just for a few moments here, I just want to speak to what I witnessed and I heard today, and my commitment to be part of staying in circle. I heard loudly and clearly from speakers, from the content of the report, these words that every child should live up to their potential. Every child has a right to be safe, to flourish, to thrive. Such important words as we think about the story of Colby, his sister, his family, and beyond. I heard so much about the family at the center of this, and when I saw that number of 6,347, I think I got that number correct from just 1 year, just thinking through all of the thousands and thousands of families that Dr. Charlesworth and the representative and other bodies have to take care of and investigate. And in many ways, their stories, their histories, their presence were very, very much in the room. And I also very much appreciated Grand Chief Willie Charlie's comments about the release of those stories and allowing a good process for grief to happen. And I hope that release comes quickly and soon. I think it bears repeating what I witnessed around commitment. I heard Grand Chief's comments around reversing the triangle and putting jurisdiction at the top of the list of recommendations. And I heard about commitments to an action plan and doing our best to reduce and eradicate violence in families and communities. And I can say that that's something that feels very important to the agency I work for. I heard early years, early help, kinship and accountability, and breaking down those darn silos that have kept us from working together in good ways for many, many years. Those were the commitments I heard, and I heard so many commitments, and I in many ways saw a commitment in action. I've been to a few of these reports that the representative has released, and it was encouraging to see the minister of the day, Grace Law, sitting alongside, not in your corner, minister, and the representative not in her corner. That adversarial approach to things doesn't really help us do good and protect children and families. So really appreciate the courage it takes to not be in one's corner. And I'll conclude. I do think the judgment of this work will take time, and I think those questions of how deep is the commitment should echo in this room for as long as possible. Those are important pieces. But at the heart of this, I remember when Dr. Charlesworth talked about Colby's sister, and I really think the teaching of lacing our fingers, which brought such comfort to Colby, is perhaps the way forward out of today. And I saw Grand Chief Willie Charlie do that with his hands around the weaving together. And I think his sister, really in that lacing of fingers, really is the way in which we can think about how we stay committed to this work, stay in circle, don't look away. How do we, as Colby's sister taught her brother, lace our fingers for brighter futures where there is less violence, there's more care, more love, and where every child has a right to be safe. On behalf of my organization, we will not turn away. We will stay in circle. We're committed to walking alongside government and the representative's office to do what we can with our remit and mandate to keep children safe, including the ones in our care. And thank you again for the honor to bear witness. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm extremely grateful to be here on the traditional unceded ancestral territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples. Today's been obviously a very difficult day to hear the messaging of much of the work that you are a part of, that I'm a part of, the changes that I think that we are here to make, and then also see the challenges that the progress still isn't there. What I will take from today, and I guess I should introduce myself, I'm Tim Barish. I'm here representing the Federation of Community Social Services and also PLEA Community Services. I am a service provider. I am here representing and will take the messaging back from today to many other service providers as well as the other circles that I'm a part of. Don't Look Away, I think, is a very interesting and meaningful words for this report. You know, in thinking of today and even just arriving here today, how many of us saw people on the street and homeless people, and we tended to just look away. And we look away because it makes us feel bad. And we don't look in and don't want to make the changes that need to happen. And I think 3 small words here, if we can just live by them that say, don't look away, will make a tremendous difference in what we've heard in this room, and also the opportunity to witness and take back to all the places we're going to go to today, later today, and in the weeks, the months, the years to come. You know, the story of Colby is tragic, it's terrible, and it's not just Colby, it's not just also the children that were thought about in this report, but there's many, many other children, many other big children, adult children who are also continuing to be here. And so I will take away a variety of pieces. Chief Phillip talked about racism. He talked about stigma. He talked about the impact that it makes to everyone. And I think those are things that we really need to look at. You know, I'm a very privileged person. I have less barriers that have been given in front of me because I am a settler. I'm a part of the colonial process. I haven't learned what it's like to be on the opposite end of it. I think about new Canadians that are coming to Canada and what barriers they're facing and the challenges that they're up against as well in the systems that we have, but also the First Nations, the Inuit, the Métis, and the histories, the horrific histories of what they've had to face. So I walk away from today thinking also the message about what is it that we can do? And I think there's a bit of hope there. And I think when we thought about what is a healthy community, it has healthy families and it has healthy children. And I think those are some real pieces we can take away from in the reverse order of how can we make children healthy and safe? How can we help their families keep children healthy and safe? And it'll probably start with having healthy and safe communities. So I thank you for the opportunity of being here today to bear witness to this, and also for the responsibility and my accountability in taking back the messages that I've heard today. Thank you.
lonely up here. I really developed a growing sense of what you could almost describe as community. When we first came into this room, we were, giving each other the fisheye, wondering, who we were and what was our capacity and what were we doing here. And as the morning unfolded, you could feel that sense of community growing and understanding and so on and so forth. The deeper we got into the issue of children and families, the more we collectively began to realize how complex and complicated it is. When you consider history and where we're at now as a society and the challenges and whatnot. But I actually believe that as we continued to listen to the amazing speakers that we had, we're beginning to know and understand that each and every one of us have a responsibility to be part of the solution. It's not something that's over there or happening in Alberta or something like that. It's here. The people that know me have heard this before. But this morning when I came, I live up Renfrew, Grandview Highway area. I deliberately come down Hastings. And, it's uncomfortable, but I need to see the deplorable conditions of so many people, living, if you can call it living, on the street. And they were somebody's grandchild at one point in their life. They were somebody's child. And, now they've been completely consumed by the opioid crisis and, of course, the homelessness and so on and so forth, all the violence that goes on down there. And too many of our own children end up there, too. So I believe this has been a successful engagement, given that growing awareness that we all have a part to play in this, in terms of working together, cooperating, stretching. Stretching's a big one, to, get out of we can't do that. Our policy says, we got to get away from that and say, well, what's the solution? So why can't we do that? I know housing is an enormous part of this puzzle. Overcrowding on the reserve is getting ridiculous. A lot of people leave the reserve because there's absolutely no place for them to live. People are beginning to live in RV trailers, tents, even people are buying shipping containers to move everything out of their basement so they can put their grandchildren in the basement. That's part of the solution, housing. And we heard the federal government not too long ago say, housing's not our responsibility. So I'm glad we were all here. I have such great gratitude for the speakers sharing their knowledge and expertise. And I heard good things. I heard things that continues to lead me in the direction of hope and optimism You know, as I mentioned earlier, I have 15 grandchildren, and I see everything through the lens of, you know, my grandkids and what the future holds for them. And I know you do too. So don't look away and report what you see. You know, it's part of our problem, what's going on next door, whether we like it or not. So report what you see. Thank you all. You're such wonderful people. I love you all. Why? Live.
On behalf of the family, I want to say thank you to the 4 designated witnesses who were called. I want to thank you for your words. I want to thank you for your commitment to being good witnesses. We have 2 really wonderful female leaders with us today. They get to say at this moment what's in their hearts and their minds as well. So we're going to call forward Deborah, please come forward. Jody, please come forward. Say what's in your hearts. As they move to the microphone, I want to add what our relative Willie Charlie had said about the Swichwa. Nutsamat. What he's saying to us is Nutsamat. Nutsamat, Nutsamat. We are one. Nutsamat, Sali. We are one spirit. As I look out at all of you who are sitting here today, we need to remember that. We're not separate. We have different names. We have different organizations that we belong to, but we're weaved together. Swichwa, that great blanket, Nutsamat, is who we are. Thank you.
Kuksham, Waikakwaiatep, Judy Wilson. My traditional name's Red Hummingbird, woman, and I'm from the unceded territory, the Secwepemc. My home community is Nisconnet, where I was chief for a very, very long time, 16 years, and served on council for 8. So, like Grand Chief, I think I was there almost 25 years in the boardroom tables of leadership, and served on many for the Union BC Indian Chiefs as Secretary Treasurer, and also First Nations Leadership Council, where Cheryl and I and Regional Chief TG worked on children and family at a very hard time where the changes were happening for jurisdiction. So I'd like to thank my colleagues. I still think of them as my colleagues for the important work that they were doing. But most importantly here today, as we came together in a good way, yesterday was through ceremony to end the process for the report. Respectfully, with Grand Chief Willie Charlie, we did approach the family. They do have their processes, so we're respecting that, and we were in communication with them, and we know that they're going to be taken care of too. I just wanted to assure people we're not leaving anybody behind, but also the commitments with everyone to ensure that, the families are taken care of, because there's not just one family, there's several families, branches, if you will. So that's why it was a little more work to do in that area. And our prayers, too, were the same. With Ledley, Speck, and Deb and I also acknowledged the families first and foremost to ensure that they're going to be taken care of, because this is going to take a while, and it has to be at their protocols and processes, too, for their respective nations. And also, the RCY team isn't just people sitting in the office at Victoria. I want all the circle of experts to stand up, please, to be recognized. If you're here, please stand up. I know there's lots of circle of experts that were part of this report, so I just want them to be acknowledged. They're actually across Canada, many people that contributed to not just the content, but the whole approach of this report. And you can sit down now. Yeah. Very wise words, because they said the same thing. We don't want it to be a book on a shelf or just something in our mind that we said last month. There was another crisis going on this month type of thing. So they came together and guided the work in a very important way. And the next group needs to stand up is all the staff that were involved. And a very conscientious group, because when we came in and we did ceremony, they were very respectful to it and open to it, especially with Ledley when he was talking about this treasure box. And there was a lot of teachings that went along the way. Soon as the cedar was laid down to start this entire process, there was that wanting to be part of it and to do everything in a respectful way. So I just wanted to assure everyone that those processes were there. We're human beings, so there may have been oversight, maybe something missed, but we all collectively worked to make sure those gaps were filled. And Ledley is with us here as his guidance and his direction, but for health reasons he couldn't be here physically with us. Hopefully he's watching and knows we are acknowledging him, honoring him. He does some tremendous work here in the province, actually globally, where he takes a lot of his work too. And being part of this process wasn't easy. We had to hear a lot of the history, as Shane pointed out, the history of what are the young people with their lived experience. And then it was woven together to me when, Grand Chief, when you did that, I was thinking this, of the hands woven together. Let's all do it. Do it together. Put your hands together, and it forms a heart. And what Shane was pointing to us when your hands are like this, and what Mary was showing us, was we're all in this together. And we can't forget that, and we don't want to look away any longer when we're driving through Hastings, or when we're walking through a school, or we're walking through any of our communities. Don't look away. It's incumbent on all of us. That's what makes the system stronger, is because we're part of it, but not the old system, a new system. The new system built on our Indigenous laws, teachings, legal orders, and jurisdiction. Because it's not like, we don't really have a word per se, jurisdiction. All we know is it's our way of being and our way of knowing as people, because we're striving to be the best human being we can be. That's our instructions from Creator, to be the best we can every day. And we take account to all the teachings, our wonderful knowledge keepers and our matriarchs from Squamish and Shane. They came together in such a good way and smudged and blessed the buildings before we even started the work. And they've been part of all of these teachings that ground us, and that's what's important. So when you walk out the doors, feel that, our elders, our matriarchs took great care of us. And sometimes with this kind of thing, this kind of report, you might have a dream, you might have some profound moment, and that's when that's going to change for you. One lady yesterday mentioned it was a whisper for her. She heard a whisper, and she changed her entire life along that good path we all want to walk on. So we don't want to look away. We want to walk on that path that's there in front of all of us to make this difference for our children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren yet to come. Because our elders, they had 200-year visions. It wasn't, oh, I'm thinking I'm going to do a plan for 1 year or 5 years. They had a plan for 200 years, so what Mary said was true. We're the ancestors for tomorrow. So we have to act and be a good ancestor and do it the best way we can. So we honor all of those who are contributing part of this, and also the work that's still yet to unfold. As Cheryl said, the biggest work is in the implementation. And we need to rise up to what Grand Chief Willie Charlie said, I will see. I will see if that is good work, because that's what we need to do. And I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad, well, Doug was here. I did see him earlier, Grand Chief Doug Kelly as well, so that we can all be part of it, because it's not going to do very good if we're not part of it, because then it's like some part of it fell off the rails. So let's not let it fall off the rails. Let's continue being in the circle. Let's continue braiding our hands together, and let's continue walking together in a good way, because that's the way we're going to uplift this report, implement the report, and create that relationship. Deb's going to talk about the things that we received, also the traditional instructions that you've seen on the table there, and then ensure everything. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I need to just thank everybody for being here and sitting here and listening. That's the commitment to me that I feel is really important, and the start to this journey forward that we need to do together. Uklama Quills Deb Foxcroft Sishot Aksup. I just wanted to say, first of all, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a wife, I'm an auntie. And that's one of the most important roles I have in my life and in my community. I just wanted to acknowledge all of you that are here and are committed to be here. We can't do this together. This is a sacred responsibility in our communities and for all of you, because our children and our youth and our families are too important. We need to move forward in a good way. We need to work together. Frankly, I'm really tired of the silos of how we do the work for children and families and youth. We can't do that anymore. We need to make this change in a good way because our children and our youth and our families are waiting for us. They've been waiting a long time. I've been involved in social services, child and family over the years and the majority of my career. And I know that there's these reports, but there's also government reports that have been done. I've been involved since the early 80s. And we were saying the same things over and over and over again in those recommendations. So I know that there is these little kind of forms out there in terms of commitments. I really would encourage you to actually take one of the paddles that are there that has a saying on it. And mine was repair. That as government officials, we need to repair what's happened to our children today, tomorrow, and into the future. We have also these sacred teachings that are there that we focused our work on with the staff and made commitments to these sacred teachings in this work in terms of relationships, respect, relevance, responsibility, reciprocity, and repair. And I just wanted to acknowledge all the staff that was involved in this process. They took this very seriously, and they committed to doing this work in a different way. And I have to hold my hands up to all of them that committed to this and have been doing this. And we did a lot of learning and teaching together. And again, it is about, how do we do this work better? How do we do this work different as we move forward? I was just thinking about, don't look away. And I know that in working in many of our communities, not only in the province, but my own communities, I always had a voice of, breaking the silence. It's important to me as a woman, as an Indigenous woman, to break the silence about any abuse in our communities. And that we need to move forward and heal from that, and that it is all of our responsibility, including the men. We need the men beside us, not in front of us, not behind us, but beside us, because we have to do that work and the healing together. I know that this has been difficult for many of us to hear the story, the history, but I just feel that this is a new day, this is a new way, and we need to do it together. I just wanted to say I acknowledge all the change makers in this room, and the leaders, and the people that have those expertise and skills and knowledge, acknowledge our cultural teachers and our elders that are here in the room that guide us, and acknowledge the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people for having us here to do this very important work, and also the ancestors that are here on this land, and hopefully they're beside us, guiding us and supporting us. So again, please make a commitment to, there's a little card there also where you can sign a commitment. You could leave at the table, or you can bring it back to your ministries, to your staff, and speak to it. And really make a commitment to do that work together. We can't do this again alone. And so in terms of, breaking the silence, it is about don't look away, and listen to the children and the youth and what they need, and the families, because we can't lose many more of our precious resources, our sacred resources. There's just no time to do that anymore. So as change makers, I'm asking you to make that commitment to be the change. Kleko, kleko, ushaksekleetsu.
So many gratitudes. I don't want to belabor it, but I do want to acknowledge that this was truly a team lift. Hands up to our cultural advisors who have been with us every step of the way, including Wedledi, who is not here, Chief Wedledi, an amazing circle of advisors who have guided us in everything that we've done as well. I also want to recognize that a number of researchers who are here in this room were really profoundly important in helping us bring this together. We do have many of our staff here, but online we probably have all of our staff who've taken the time to be with us today, and I just want to say to every one of you RCY staff online, thank you. It truly was a full organization lift. And I know there's many others online as well, so thank you for joining us online. There are paddles and commitment cards. Please take one, share them around. And I know that for us at RCY, our commitment is that this is where the real work starts. This is a story, a history that we're holding gently and carefully, but now we work because we have to bring change into the systems that support children and families. And with that, the acknowledgement that each and every one of us is the system. It is each and every one of us who will make the change in the way that we show up every day to work with children and families. So that is our commitment at RCY, and it's what we'll be carrying forward. We've had hard conversations for the last year as we've tended carefully to family, to community, to all of those who touched Colby's life, and we'll continue to have them. So it's about illuminating as we move forward the truth and being steady in that and courageous. So I'm going to hand it back to our wonderful elders. Thank you for carrying us so beautifully today. There is a feast afterwards. Please welcome, I'm welcoming all of you to come and share food, break bread. If Wedledi was here, he would be saying share breath and spirit. And so we welcome you all to share food.
My hands are up to each and every one of you who did sit here and listen through the whole thing. I'm so happy, that you had an open heart and an open mind to do that. I already introduced myself early this morning when we did the Welcome to Territory. Qualtinot's my ancestral name. Kathy Nahaney is my English name. And we welcomed you to the territory this morning because this is actually Squamish Nation territory. We did have a couple of small villages here, as well as over in Stanley Park, we had 4 longhouses over there. So that's why we were invited to welcome each and every one of you here. And I just want to say, I'm thankful for you being here. I'm honored, and I want to say, I really want you to have safe travels home because, you're the ones that are helping to make the changes. And you need to keep a strong mind, strong heart, and strong spirit to be able to do that. And I've only been in social work probably just under 18 years, but I work in downtown Eastside. So when Grand Chief Phillips was talking about coming down Hastings, I work in a building for women who used to be homeless, and they have half the building is women and children. The other half is single women, and they all still struggle in some way with addiction. And so we pray every day for the children who live in the building, who have to witness the ones, that have the addictions, or sometimes we have to kind of get tough and throw guys out that shouldn't be in there. And, we always try and ensure that the little ones are not in the vicinity so they're not witnessing what's happening. But that's real life, that's a place where they have a roof over their head. So what you're all doing, keep moving forward, keep protecting the children. So I thank you once again for being here. And I'm going to ask my sister Naxalia to do the closing prayer.
I give thanks to our dear Creator and our ancestors that have been here with us today. I give thanks for each and every one to have that ears opened, eyes watching, heart open, and choma, one heart, one mind in our language. I ask the ancestors to continue to walk this journey with us, to give us the strength that we need to in the days ahead, in the years ahead, in the decade ahead. It's not going to be easy, but the commitment is here by all. And if each and every one honors that commitment, as they walk out the door, don't forget the commitment. Say it every day. How are we going to do it? How are we going to network? What's the next steps? We can do it, because we have to remember we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. So now into the future, our unborn will be saying that about us, the change makers. Osium Tamata Kunse.